Again, I'm chair of the Adaptation Working Group with Seniors for Climate Action Now, and I convene the Heat Collaborative, which has organized this webinar. Can I say how happy I am to see the turnout tonight to discuss the very important issue of extreme heat and how several organizations in Ontario are mobilizing to protect us from its impacts. Before we get into, well, I've already said we're going to be recorded. I'd like to invite you to put your name and your location in the chat, and if you can, to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples native to the region where you live and work. That said, the chat can be very distracting for speakers and listeners both, so I do ask you to use it sparingly, except for putting your name in at the beginning, and also if you have links to resources that you think would be useful for the rest of us to have a look at, please feel free to do that in the chat. I would ask you also, please, to put questions for speakers in the Q&A and not in the chat. So not everybody is going to see the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, what you can do is hit the More button, and you should find the Q&A come up there, and then you can click on that, and the Q&A then should show up, and you can put questions into it. We're going to ask you to put in questions as we go along in the meeting. Our plan is to have the formal part of the meeting go until 8:30. But if our speakers and audience are interested in staying beyond that time, then we can keep the discussion going until 9 p.m. So, and I should have put my screen on before this. I will do it now. And once again, whoops, slideshow from the beginning. So before we get into a few more details about the organization of the webinar, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. So Indigenous advice about giving a land acknowledgement suggests that to begin with who and where you are. So I begin that way. My name is Jennifer Penny. I am a descendant of settlers from England on my father's side, who arrived 2 centuries ago in what we call now call Newfoundland. And on my mother's side, settlers from Scotland, who arrived in Ontario more recently. I live today in the Roncesvalles area of Takaronto, which is where I'm speaking from today. In Ronces, as it's affectionately known, we are privileged to enjoy several murals by Indigenous artists, including the one you see on this slide. The mural was painted several years ago by Philip Cote of the Moose Deer Point First Nation on Georgian Bay, together with another artist, Jim Thierry Bravo, who arrived in Canada from Ecuador 30 plus years ago. I love this collaboration between the descendant of one of the original peoples of this land and a relative newcomer. It seems like a small act of artistic reconciliation that benefits us all. I speak to you from the traditional home of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples that now include, and Toronto now includes many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We're covered by the Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. As we meet today to talk about how we protect ourselves and each other from one of the major impacts of climate breakdown, I invite you to take a moment to appreciate the Indigenous peoples who lived and cared for this land for thousands of years before the settlement of European colonizers. It's important to acknowledge that Indigenous peoples in Ontario are among those who are most affected by climate change and extreme heat. In the last few weeks, we've seen many news stories about melting ice roads that cut off northern Indigenous communities from the supplies and services that they need. And extreme heat is leading to more and larger wildfires that have threatened many Indigenous communities in recent years. Preparing this land acknowledgement has made me think about the fact that our heat collaborative has not as yet involved Native organizations, Indigenous organizations or spokespersons. And this is an important oversight, which I hope we can correct in the coming months. Thank you, Miigwech. The Heat Collaborative is an informal group of organizations who promote awareness and action on the risks of extreme heat and propose solutions for our constituencies and members at the local, provincial, and national levels. You can see the logos of these organizations on the slide, and you will meet representatives of several of them in the coming presentations. I do need to say a few words about the organization I represent, Seniors for Climate Action Now, which works to inform and mobilize seniors on climate issues. We are a growing organization with about 750 members currently, most in Ontario, but recently bringing in members from other provinces, including Alberta, I'm happy to say. Some of our members are organized in local chapters, and they work on heat issues locally. The information posters you see, for example, on the right-hand side, were produced and distributed by Scan Guelph. Scan Kingston members are also very involved in a campaign to get their city council to adopt a maximum heat bylaw for rental properties. And chapters in Toronto and Hamilton have also supported maximum heat bylaw campaigns in those cities. Scan's adaptation working group has also been working at the national and provincial levels. We wrote a major submission for the National Adaptation Strategy process in 2022, for example, emphasizing the issues that seniors had with climate change. In 2023, we launched a successful Freedom of Information campaign to get the provincial government to release several climate impacts reports they had commissioned and then kept secret, which we then made available on our website. And last year, we wrote a private member's bill for MPP Peter Tabbins on climate change adaptation and resilience, which provides a plan for Ontario to safeguard us from climate-aggravated heat, floods, storms, and wildfires. I'll have more to say on that later. Last spring, finally, we convened the Heat Collaborative that has sponsored this webinar. So the webinar is organized in 3 parts as follows. I'm giving the welcome and introduction now. We will follow with speakers from 6 different organizations. After my introduction, Eddie Rue and Lydia Ferreira will speak about actions their organizations are taking to make tenants safer from extreme heat events. We'll take up to 3 short questions after they speak. So if you have questions for them, you may want to put them in the Q&A, as I indicated earlier. If there are more than 3 questions, we'll defer those to the third part of the webinar, a more general discussion. Then we will have Laura Walton and John Odick speak about the work the Ontario Federation of Labour and Occupational Health Clinics for Workers have undertaken to make workers safer from extreme heat. And again, we'll take up to 3 questions after they speak. Finally, Flora Aldrich will describe a campaign for children's health related to heat, and Jacqueline Wilson, an environmental lawyer, will speak to her activities to reduce heat impacts, again followed by a few questions. I recognize that we're trying to cram a lot into this webinar and that the speakers will not have time to describe their actions in detail. We hope that your questions and discussion will allow them to elaborate and provide more information. So let's look at what's happening in the world of heat. The graph on this slide shows how temperatures have been rising around the world as a result of fossil fuel and other greenhouse gas emissions. The chart only goes to 2023, but if we added 2024, the bar on the right would be higher again than the ones that are shown, because last year was the hottest year since temperature records began. It's not only average temperatures that have been rising, though. Heat records are broken every year in various towns and cities in Canada and around the world. We have to think about Lytton, BC, which got to 49.6 degrees C in 2021, shortly before wildfires destroyed the whole town. Environment Canada used the latest in attribution science to determine that 37 of the shorter local and regional heat waves in Canada last year were due largely to climate change and not to natural variability. This includes Ontario towns that set heat records in June and in August last year. Of course, temperature records that make the news don't tell the whole story. I know I don't usually think that it's particularly hot outside if the temperature is, say, 26 degrees C, especially if I'm feeling a breeze or sitting in the shade. Indoors can be a little different. A room with windows that open on two sides can catch a breeze if there is one, but very few apartments, nursing homes, or classrooms have this kind of natural ventilation. So in the absence of mechanical air conditioning, heat will build up in those places. Similarly, if we are exposed to solar radiation, like many outdoor workers, or other forms of radiant heat, our bodies may heat up to levels that are uncomfortable or even dangerous. And if you factor in high humidity, it feels a lot hotter. Weather reports these days often include a humidex rating, which combines the effect of temperature and humidity and better reflects likely discomfort than either heat or humidity alone. So this is the humidex chart from Environment Canada. It's quite a useful chart. Temperature is along the bottom axis and humidity is along the vertical axis on the left-hand side. The combination of the temperature and the humidity give you a humidex reading that is typically higher than the actual temperature. The blue area in the graph represents a combination of temperature and humidity that's relatively comfortable for most of us. You can see that the temperature of 26 degrees is tolerable as long as the humidity is less than 35%. But as you move through the green and yellow humidex zones, discomfort increases, and the orange and red zones are actively dangerous to our health. This brings us to a great series of reports that CBC did in its Urban Heat Project in 2023. CBC put 50 heat and humidity monitors in housing in several Canadian cities during that summer. This graph shows what they found in one Windsor apartment. The burgundy line at the bottom of the chart shows the outdoor average temperature. It doesn't seem that bad. The highest temperature is just a little more than 26 degrees C around July 7th. Now, this is a rolling 24-hour average, so the temperature would have been higher that day and lower at night. But check out the orange line, which is the actual temperature in this apartment. And is anywhere from 6 to 10 degrees C higher than the outdoor average temperature. And then if you look at the yellow line, which takes into account humidity, you can see that the effective temperature was even higher and close to 32 for several days in July. As the CBC reported, in Windsor, more than 50% of the households they examined were consistently above 26 degrees indoors, with one household that never went below this threshold temperature. They went on to say, studies have shown that being in conditions of 26 degrees or higher for extended periods can have a negative impact on overall health. And for all people, it's dangerous to be in spaces above 31 C for prolonged periods. So what happens when we are exposed to high heat? Well, first of all, high heat drives up body temperature, and it leads to fatigue, heat exhaustion, and extreme cases to deadly heat stroke if the body temperature rises to 40 degrees C or higher. Our bodies try to cool us by sweating, but if we don't take in enough water, dehydration can cause cramps, rashes, weakness, and even kidney problems. In hot conditions, the body also directs blood flow to the skin, which makes the heart work harder, a problem for those with high blood pressures or heart disease. Heat waves are very often accompanied by poor air quality, which also can worsen respiratory problems. Finally, prolonged heat has social impacts as well, causing confusion among some people who are exposed, leading to injuries, and sometimes even violence in communities. So who is most vulnerable? As the graph indicates, those most vulnerable are pregnant women, newborns and young children, the elderly, and those with chronic illnesses, largely because all of those have more difficulty regulating their body temperature. Seniors are particularly vulnerable. More than 2/3 of the 619 people who died as a result of BC's 2021 heat dome were seniors. This is also the case for other heat events that have killed large numbers of people. Something that this graphic doesn't address, however, is that most of those who died were low income, many living alone, and with pre-existing medical conditions. In addition to the vulnerability of individual populations, it's important to think about who is most exposed. In urban environments, the concentration of materials like concrete, brick, and asphalt, and the lack of green spaces, and ironically, heat exhaust from air conditioners and other equipment can crank up outdoor temperatures by 4 to 6 degrees C more than surrounding rural environments. Tenants in older buildings, especially in inner city neighborhoods, can be exposed to high heat for much of the summer. Children in older school buildings, especially with classrooms on higher floors, may swelter in June and September. And then firefighters, roofers, road and construction workers, kitchen workers, and farm workers can also be exposed. Many of those are not only exposed to heat, but also to toxic chemicals in the work environment, which can exacerbate the effect of the heat. So what needs to be done? Somehow I've missed this on my paper, but as I indicated earlier, in 2023, SCAN developed with Peter Tabbins of the NDP Bill 198, which was a bill allowing for actions to be taken by the Ontario government to protect these populations. The bill for heat, we are actually looking at protecting populations not only from heat, but from storms, from flooding, and from wildfires. So the heat demands that we had in that program were tracking heat-related deaths and illnesses, which does not happen in Ontario. So it's hard to know actually how many people are dying or becoming very ill as a result of their exposure to heat. Awareness campaigns for the population about taking care of themselves when there's heat, about heat mapping to identify vulnerable communities, about mandatory planning and funds available for cooling urban hotspots. Mandatory planning by municipalities, by the way. To create priority cooling for schools, childcare centers, hospitals, nursing homes, and seniors housing, and to make sure to regulate maximum temperature requirements for rental units and for farm worker housing, about which we'll hear a little later. Also to provide incentives for cooling retrofits for rental properties and heat stress workplace regulations and enforcement. This bill is online, and you can all get it on the Ontario government website. Although, of course, they haven't done nothing about it. It didn't reach second reading, and now with the new government, we'd have to start all over again. So I've listed a few resources on this slide, but I won't read them now. We plan to make available a more comprehensive list of resources along with the recording so that people who want to learn more have some recommendations about where to go for those resources. So if you have any questions about anything I've said in this introduction, I'd be happy to discuss them after our panel has spoken. But first, I'd like to introduce the first two speakers of our panel. Ken, can you please bring up Eddie's slides? Our first speaker is Eddie Rouet. Eddie is the elected chair of the Central Ottawa chapter of the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. He joined ACORN in the late 2010 and has been an active leader in ACORN's campaigns for climate justice and tenants' rights ever since. He is passionate about climate justice and tenant rights ever since. I've already said that. He is passionate about climate justice because by building more sustainable communities, we can help not just our neighbors, but tenants and workers around the world. Eddie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. And just to be clear, I wish I could say I'd been a member of Acorn since 2010,
Oh, sorry.
but it's the late 2010s, about
Okay.
2019.
All right.
So hi everyone. As I said, my name is Eddie. And for those not familiar with Acorn, which is what the acronym spells, we are a multi-issue, membership-based community union made up of low and moderate income people. So for us, the essential elements of achieving change are building community power. And in doing so, we take on landlords and corporations through direct action to fight for better laws to protect the rights of tenants and other low and moderate income people. Every member of our organization has a vote and can elect our leadership, like myself, directly. We actually have over 177,000 members organized into
Wow.
30 neighborhood chapters across 6 provinces of Canada, including obviously Ontario here. We're active in Ottawa, my city, but also Toronto, Hamilton, London, the Waterloo region, and Peel. And indeed, our members, particularly the tenants, and that as Jennifer mentioned, low income people are especially adversely affected by extreme heat. Next slide, please. So we, have been working around this and related issues for a while. We operate at a number of levels, both provincial but also municipal. Unfortunately, under the current PC government, we have not found the government of Ontario to be particularly receptive to the issues that we bring forward. So, by and large, we have really been focusing on municipal campaigns, particularly starting in cities like Hamilton and Toronto that are generally more receptive, where the city councils are generally more in line with the policies that we're proposing. And the hope is to sort of use these cities as examples so that similar bylaws can be spread across the province. So our Beat the Heat campaigns active in Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, London, and Mississauga include the following demands. One, a maximum heat bylaw that requires landlords to keep units below 26 degrees. Two, to track heat-related deaths and illnesses. And three, to support tenants with the cost of running energy efficient air conditioning or heat pumps, as the case may be. So I'll give you a snapshot of sort of where we're at in each city. Next slide, please. So Hamilton was the first Acorn office to launch a Beat the Heat campaign all the way back in 2022. It started with a series of planning meetings with members, followed by a large rally outside City Hall demanding a max heat bylaw. We actually created and conducted and released a tenant survey in Hamilton, which got major media attention. Low income, senior, and disabled members shared their experiences with extreme heat, and our campaign led to the city starting to monitor heat-related deaths and illnesses through emergency department visits, giving 3 free bus tickets on extreme heat days, an expansion of air conditioning subsidies through Ontario Works for more low-income residents, as well as directions given to city staff to develop a max heat bylaw. So that is still in the process of being written. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, so this is kind of outlines a lot of what I was talking about, the different means that we took to advance the campaign in Hamilton. We can move on to the next slide. Oh yeah, okay, sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself. So yeah, this is all stuff that I've covered. So next slide, if you please. So yeah, in Ottawa, again, my city. This past summer, as you can see here, we surveyed 295 tenants about climate issues, and our key findings were that nearly 50%, that is nearly half of all people who took the survey, said their unit is too hot in the summer, and fully 40% said they had no air conditioning or other form of cooling at all. Since July, we've organized petition days and met with councilors and city staff. And indeed, we are actually seeing a certain form of, are the issues that we raise being borne out. For instance, in a recent report from the Ottawa Public Health Agency, supports exploring a maximum heat bylaw, which again, very much aligned with our demands. And now we are currently working to get a motion on the city's work plan. We do have a number of councillors here in Ottawa who have often worked with Acorn, and we're sort of trying to figure out who will actually be the one to put their name to the motion to study a max heat bylaw. In Toronto, uh, alongside Hamilton, is really the furthest ahead in the campaign. So, thanks to Acorn and our allies, the city is actively developing a max heat bylaw. Toronto Acorn has organized rallies, helped tenants fight back against illegal um, AC fees, and mobilized our members to do public deputations and speak at city consultations. We've already had some big wins. So, like I said, landlords have been pressured into dropping the illegal extra charges that they had been giving for air conditioning. As well, more tenants in Toronto community housing have been able to gain access to free air conditioning units, which is indeed something we are fighting to expand. Next slide, please.
1 minute left, Eddie.
Okay, gotcha. So in Mississauga, they actually already have a maximum heat bylaw, but it only applies to tenants who already have air conditioning. So last year, Peel Acorn launched a campaign to expand the bylaw to include all tenants, especially the most vulnerable. London is in the earlier stages of the campaign. The city did direct staff to explore a max heat bylaw, but it was based on Mississauga, which, as I said, leaves out a lot of tenants. Staff are supposed to develop the consultation, there's the bylaw in consultation with quote their landlord and tenant forum, which we are represented on. So we are going to be pushing to make sure that what ultimately comes out of the process is better than what they have in Mississauga. And next slide, please. So yeah, in closing, we still have a lot going on. In the coming months, we'll be launching a report on AGIs and retrofits, which is looking at the unfortunate reality that acorns that corporate landlords are often passing down the costs of green retrofits to their tenants. So that's something that we are fighting to correct. Release date is to be determined. We're also going to be having more rallies and against extreme heat events in cities across Ontario. We have online actions. So really, if you're interested in contributing or getting involved, please by all means go to acorncanada.org and sign up for our newsletter. And that's the best way to really keep apprised of what Acorn is up to. And with that, thank you so much for the time and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Eddie. I want to remind people who came in perhaps after I started to present that we're going to have opportunities for you to ask Eddie questions, follow-up questions after the next speaker. and you will also have opportunities to ask her questions. So in the meantime, I would like to, Ken, if you could put Lydia's slides up, that would be great. Our next speaker is Lydia Ferreira. Lydia also organizes to protect tenants from heat and other climate impacts. Lydia is the community engagement specialist coordinating all aspects of community work at the organization Community Resilience to Extreme Weather. She joined CREW in 2017 to facilitate resilience to climate impacts in St. Jamestown area, a dense and diverse high-rise neighborhood in Toronto. She understands the multiple issues around equity and newcomer populations, as well as the different experiences of seniors, low-income tenants, people who are mobility challenged, and more. Lydia is a foreign-trained architect specializing in urban planning, but she also serves as a member on the City of Toronto's Climate Advisory Group. Lydia, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So hi everyone, so my name is Lydia Ferreira and I am CREW Community Engagement Specialist. CREW is Community Resilient to Extreme Weather. Was created in 2014 after the ice storm in 2013. So the whole idea was to create this organization to communicate in a very simple way to Toronto residents the risk of direct impacts of climate change until now. So CREW joined the Mayway Charitable Society share platform in 2019. That is a national charitable organization. So Mayway provides us human resources and legal support. In 2016, CREW developed a Neighbors Helping Neighbors program. So basically the whole idea was to start training low-income seniors and the bill in Toronto, in the Toronto area, so about like how they need to be prepared and adapt to any kind of emergency. Since then, CREW has focused its work on low-income, high-rise neighborhoods where everyone is invited to join us. Next, please. So this is all our programs. So I am just going to pass very quickly. So you are going to find more about all our programs in our website. But the whole work that we are doing in the community is emergency preparedness, green discovery walk, seniors gathering, heatwave protocol. So we create one. And finding and facilitating the local meeting spaces, like we are looking for emergency hubs, and supporting and empowering trained volunteer leaders, so especially to go to City Hall and do deputations. Next. So that is in 2022. CREW, in collaboration with the Toronto Environment Alliance, we implemented the community-led climate resilience in St. Jamestown. So it was funded by the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, that is a branch of the government that is in between Mexico, Canada, and USA. And so we collaborate with T to create this like a neighborhood heatwave protocol. So you're going to see that St. Jamestown is like 19 buildings. It's the most densely populated neighborhood in Canada, with 19 high-rise buildings, as I mentioned before. All the issues there is like power outages, polluted air, heat illnesses, mental stress, among other emergencies. Heatwave is huge there. This initiative showed us how impacted high-rise communities can lead climate resilience. Next. So this is the heatwave protocol. So how we create it, so we collaborate with a diverse group of volunteers. We collaborate with community organizations, service providers, and also with the City of Toronto. We create a draft about how we need to adapt heatwaves, especially in this kind of neighborhood that is like heat urban island. Next. So how we created the protocol is like asking people about like, for example, like we were asking people, especially tenants, about like how hot was the apartment. So no one was having any idea. They say it's very hot, Then we decided to provide them thermometers in a calendar, and we were collecting data about how hot was the apartment. So, and also we have all these different meetings with key volunteers about like learning more about what exactly are the issues in all these different buildings. One of the issues, for example, is like overcrowded situation. Most of the apartments, they are only one bedroom apartment, and many families are living there, like families with like 5, 7 members. So can you imagine that during a heat season, the apartment is hotter and hotter. And also we conduct several surveys, like before we implemented the protocol, and during and after the protocol. So next. This is the protocol. So this protocol you're going to find on our website. The whole idea with the protocol is like to show people how they need to be prepared when the heat wave is coming. The protocol has 5 different areas. One of them is communication. So basically it's like how we need to tell everyone that the heat wave is coming. Homes, how you need to keep cool as possible your apartment. Cool areas and cooling station is basically is when your apartment is very hot, where you can go, like a cooling site or like a park or like a something like that. Contact system is basically is like when volunteers are basically is helping vulnerable people to be sure that everyone is okay, is to check in, if senior are okay, or people who is with mental issues, or people with have dogs or babies. And the last one is support services. That is when residents need to access services around the neighborhood. Next. And this is the learning from our surveys. Like 70% of respondents were not aware of the city or the cooling spaces, so they don't have an idea where to go when when the weather is very hot. 69% of people say they are very extremely uncomfortable in their homes during heat waves. 36% of respondents say having no air conditioning. Then when we have the draft of the heat wave protocol, we asked them how useful is the protocol. 91.8% they say that the protocol will work in San Town. And what was the policy action about this? Is basically is work towards bylaws to regulate maximum temperature in rental units. And then we did the last survey about like how important it is for the heat wave team to advocate for a maximum temperature in an apartment of 26 degrees. 47 people say extremely important. So, and then you are going to see the circle day is 95.7 people say, yes, it's very important. So next. And then what we are going to continue in 2025 is like continue to support and empower training volunteer leaders to make presentation to community groups, university, city hall. We are going to continue building community resilient and low-income, high-rise building in San Town and beyond. And that is our website if you want to learn more about us. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Lydia. Shelley, have we got questions in the Q&A for these speakers?
There are no questions in the Q&A. There's one person has raised their hand.
Sophia, are you asking a question for?
Yeah, my question is from the crew. Thank you so much. I am very interested to ask about it because I am a community leader and I am getting climate change action grants from the city. Previously we did in Thorncliffe. And I am not sure, I forgot the name of the lady. She was very kind and she gave us a training about the emergency preparedness. I need the contact number of the person and I need just like the booklets previously I got in different languages. So how I can connect with the person right now? I think so, Lydia.
Lydia, are you able to answer that?
Oh yeah, so Safia, you can go to our website and you are going to find there more like, especially the Highway protocol is there. But if
Okay.
you want to contact me, I am going to put my email in the chat so you can have that and then you can send me an email.
Yes, please.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Great, thank
You
you.
solved my problem. You know.
Jennifer,
you.
Jennifer, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Eddie, were there any questions for Eddie? I actually have a question for you, Eddie. What have been the big challenges of the work that you've been doing in Ottawa?
I mean, I would say that, like the main challenge is uh just sort of figuring out the best way to get things through council, because, like I said, we do have some counselors who are, like generally on board with our agenda, with the policies that we promote. There are some who are honestly just kind of dead set against. And then, of course, in the middle, there's just the sort of vast field that can kind of be swayed one way or another. Um, and I mean, part of the challenge with that, honestly, is that a lot of the fence sitters are often most easily won over by, oh, well, if the staff put out a report that says they should do this, then they'll do this. But the trouble with that is that, when you kind of get down into the bureaucracy of that, it can take staff, months, even the better part of a year to write a report. And so, it's slow going. It does ultimately result in, bylaws that sort of serve the ends that we are looking to accomplish. But sometimes it can mean that these issues kind of linger while we're waiting on the staff to bring out the report that will suddenly convince half of city council that this is an issue they need to take seriously.
Thanks very much, Eddie. So, I had my husband print all of these things and I'm missing some of my notes. Anyway, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Laura Walton, who is president of the Ontario Federation of Labor. Ken, can you get Laura's slides up, please? Laura is, as I said, the president of the Ontario Federation of Labor, Canada's largest provincial labor federation. The OFL represents 54 unions and 1 million workers in Ontario. Laura previously served as president of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Ontario School Board Council of Unions, the OSBCU, which represents over 55,000 education workers across the province. In 2022, Laura led a historic strike that won unprecedented gains for the OSBCU members and that led to the defeat of Bill 28, the provincial government's landmark anti-labor legislation. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And just a huge thank you for welcoming us into your space this evening so that we can talk about, the Heat is On, heat stress campaign that's currently going on with the Federation of Labor. And I think what we'll do is kind of skip the next slide because it repeats what Jennifer just said. Perfect. So as mentioned, originally I was an education worker. I was an education assistant working in Belleville. And so the heat stress piece was a real interest of mine predating coming to the OFL. I often was in classrooms complete with Kevlar, and those classrooms are not air conditioned. And the expectation is that, you are, and sometimes, engaging with students who are in crisis while you're fully decked out in protective bodywear. And there were many times where colleagues of mine were ill as a result of these heated classrooms with the addition of this. But this heat stress campaign actually came out of our convention in 2023, where the delegates were saying, listen, we've got to really focus on this. And for many different reasons. Some people come to it from a place of climate justice, where we know that the temperature is rising around the globe. Some are coming from a space of health and safety, and that's where I get the honor and pleasure to work with John from OCAL. But, these are some of the pieces that we're hearing when we're out there is, every single workplace is impacted by heat stress. And one of the things that we like to remind people is that our working conditions are the learning, caring, living, existing conditions of everyone. So how we treat workers, and if we can get this kind of legislation in for workers, will have an impact on everyone's daily life in a variety of different ways. So we'll go to the next piece, please, the next slide. So we originally launched the Heat is On campaign with the Ontario NDP in May 22 and 2024. And I was joined at Queen's Park with workers, education workers from CUPE, as well as a worker from the United Steelworkers working in, one of the hottest factories that I've ever been in Hamilton. We had Peter Tobins, once again, involved in this as he teased at the introduction of a private member's bill for better protection from heat stress. And sad, I'm going to say that on top of this, the Ministry of Labor held a 30-day consultation on heat stress regulations, and as a result, took absolutely zero action. As a matter of fact, his response, the Minister of Labor's response to the Heat is On campaign was that every worker has the right to refuse unsafe work, which is not true, but that it's just common sense and that there should not be any further regulations put into place because it's just common sense how to deal with it. Well, I don't know about you, but common sense is not a rose that grows in everyone's garden. And we need employers to be clearly directed what they need to do when it comes to addressing heat stress in our workplace. Next slide, please. We had great pickup. And I think that's because everyone kind of relates to the fact that they are working or living or existing, or they have students in schools. So tons of really great response. And what was really exciting about it is the public response included workers coming forward to share their own experience with extreme heat. And it was from a variety of different sectors, from migrant workers to residential farm workers, education workers, factory workers, long-term care home workers. There really truly was not a sector that wasn't coming forward and saying, hey, this has been my experience as a result of this. Next slide, please. Fast forward, we then went November 7th, where we tabled a private member's bill. And we already had thousands of signatures on petitions. We already had documented cases of heat stress and how it was impacted. And so we put this forward with this bill by Peter to implement a workers' heat protection standard. And I know that you're not going to have to guess what the outcome was. Once again, the PC government chose not to pay attention. So when you hear somebody talk about how they're working for workers, it's important to realize that they had an opportunity to work for workers in this case and failed to act. Next slide, please. So what do you do next? We're still continuing on with our OFL heat stress campaign, but we have a wonderful group, a health and safety group that, John is part of. And so we're talking about how we need to educate people about what heat stress looks like, how we can actually get in there and start to document what it looks like, because people will think, oh, well, back in my day, it was hot at school too, or back in my day. But the fact remains is that the days are becoming more and more frequent. But what we also know is that there's an excellent tool, which I know John is going to be speaking about shortly, that talks about heat stress on the OCAL website. The problem is that we need to also be educating our employers around what it looks like. And are we ensuring that people have a chance to recover from exposure from heat stress before they're asked to go back into a heated area? So moving forward, we are going to be continuing our lobbying efforts. We're going to be continuing our campaign, but we're now turning our minds to webinars such as this, where we can join with OCAL, with others, with people who have experienced it, to talk about what does it actually look like and how people can start to actually, do work refusals in the case of heat stress, where they can actually be using their joint health and safety committees in their workplace to put in recommendations around heat stress. We have to get actively involved into the workspaces that we're in, because we know that if we can impact our working conditions, we will have an impact on the public as far as what they experience in heat stress as well. So folks can go to the OFL.ca to the heat is on. There are still ongoing petitions that are going. There's more information that's going to be coming out. And as we move forward into the summer, which we expect, I mean, it's hard to believe right now because it was snowing when I came home from work, but eventually it is going to get warmer in the province of Ontario. And we know that heat stress is going to be impacting, you know, our communities, our schools, our long-term care homes, our factories, our farms once again. And we need to be ready to ensure that we're keeping workers safe.
Thank you very much, Laura. That's great. John will bring up in his own slides. I do want to say to everyone that you should feel free to put questions to Laura and to John in the Q&A as you think of them, or if you don't have time to do that before John reaches the end of his presentation, we can take some hands up questions that you can say to us verbally. So our next speaker is John Odick, and Laura has referred to him several times, and you'll find out why shortly. John has worked as an occupational hygienist for 45 years, beginning in iron foundries, talk about hot, and later joined the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers when it opened in 1989. He's had a long career in this. Measuring heat stress was an important part of his work in the foundries, which worked around molten iron. When he joined OCAL, he worked with union reps, particularly George Boddick from the CAW, now Unifor, to create the Humidex heat response plan. He also helped update OCAL's heat stress tools, which are available on OCAL's website, which I noticed he put in the chat. His current interest is encouraging workers and citizens to collect heat stress data with thermal hygrometers, about which you will learn in his talk. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so just a bit about the occupational health clinics. We have clinics throughout Ontario, 7 clinics, and we're occupational health teams with doctors, occupational health nurses, ergonomists, hygienists, organizers, and support staff. We're funded through the Ministry of Labor from WSIB premiums, and our board of directors is made up from volunteers from labor unions. Our website has a number of items called our Heat Stress Toolkit, which includes a booklet about different strategies and our Humidex-based heat plan. There's also a calculator. Last summer, we had outreach teams working with migrant farm workers, and 2 of them, Cynthia Mora and Daisy Rivendiera, in the Simcoe and Niagara regions, connected with workers who were concerned about the heat levels in their bunkhouses. And they encountered these folks during heat stress seminars that they gave. And because it was time when we were still using COVID precautions, we had these air nets, which measure carbon dioxide, but they also measure temperature and humidity. And so when they talked about the heat stress, they offered to loan these out to the farm workers to see what it was like in their bunkhouses. And in 2023, we lent a few out, and they took pictures of the results and emailed them to us. However, these things can actually measure heat every 5 or 10 minutes for weeks on end. And so we decided to use this in 2024. And we were worried about the bunkhouse heat because for occupational heat stress exposure, it is assumed that when you go home, you're not exposed to heat stress. And what they were telling us is the heat was actually worse at night in the bunkhouse than it was during the day out in the fields in the sun. And so we used these criteria. Anything over 26 to 30 is slightly warm and unacceptable, and over 30 is dangerous. So here's some of the data that we collected here. The yellow bars at the bottom is when the sun was shining. So it's a measure of how much radiation is getting through the clouds. And the red and black lines, which are almost the same, is the indoor temperature inside the bunkhouse. The red solid line is the humidex outdoors, and the blue line is the outdoor temperature. So using this criteria, we note that on this particular day, the humidex outdoors was 35 and the humidex indoors was actually 50 at about 8 o'clock at night. And the difference between the outdoor and indoor temperature was 13 degrees, 12, 9 degrees over the evening and in the night, whereas during the day it was only about 2 degrees difference. So you can see that they're not recovering from the heat stress during the day in the evening and at night. So we thought for this year, can we do this with workers and citizens as well as our data collectors? The equipment is not very expensive. It's $20 to $30 and it's very accurate actually. Recording the workplace and the residence context is important. And at the end of the season, or even during the season, if things get really bad, we can assess the measurements and how they stack up against the heat stress criteria, so we can see how we're doing. We have tested these thermal hygrometers against gold standard heat stress machines, and for temperatures, they're well within the plus or minus 0.5 degrees Celsius accuracy. For relative humidity, they did quite well too, except for this yellow one here, which was 25 years old. The temperature still worked, but the humidity sensor was not working properly anymore. So they're generally pretty reliable. The ones we recommended was a $20 one, which is made by SwitchBot, which has very good accuracy, but it doesn't have a display. You have to use an app on your phone in order to read it, which is helpful in bunkhouses because sometimes employers don't like to see workers measuring conditions in the workplace. This other one is quite a bit more expensive, about $250, and it also does carbon dioxide, so you can also evaluate the indoor air quality at the same time, how well the ventilation is turning the air over in the building. So you can read the temperature and humidity off this little unit, and this little unit actually stores the data every minute for 60 days. So you can imagine how much information you put on your spreadsheet. But we also need to collect the information about where the sensor's located, what the symptoms are, things about the building, whether the windows are open, blinds, shades are present, thermostat setting, air conditioner setting if there is one, and other actions taken to keep cool. Here's an example where you draw a layout and take some pictures of the building so we can figure out patterns among buildings for heat stress. This summer, it looks like it's supposed to be hotter than normal in most places in Canada. There's a little spot here on the coast in BC that's cool, and the Grand Banks, but other than that, it looks like it's going to be pretty hot. So our plan is to have people, organizations, pick a coordinator and set up a data collection sheet for their organization, and we can help them with that. And you can document the temperature and humidity. We found that holding heat stress training workshops where you have these available and actually work through how to fill them out would be a very helpful way to get the ball rolling. And at the workshops, you can sign them up and provide them with the kit and keep in contact with them over the summer and answer questions. And if the questions are difficult, we have experts, hygienists in OCal that can help with difficult workplace problems. And at the end of the season, we can all sit down together and analyze the data and determine how well heat stress was being managed in Ontario during the summer of 2025. So if anyone's interested or has other ideas, these are my contact information, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Jennifer, you're muted, but I think you're asking me if there's questions.
Yes.
Some people, could someone brief us, those of us who don't know, on what the current workplace temperature regulations are?
So for heat, there is nothing.
Okay.
There is some regulations around, cold temperatures, but there's currently nothing in place for heat temperatures, which is one of the biggest problems, right? And John, when he was doing this presentation with us, one of the things that we noticed is that when the media came out saying that it was going to be a hot day or that it was a heat advisory, there tended to be more reports about heat stress. So which begs to question, do people think that they have to wait for the heat advisory to come from the media before they act on whether their workplace is actually too hot? Which is why I'm excited to be doing some of the work that we're pushing to get some of those monitors out into different workplaces. It's only going to help the work that we're doing. It's only going to help the work that OCAO is doing, and it's just going to keep workers safer.
Right. Question for John. Do you think this would work in schools?
Oh, yes, very much so. The indoor air quality one would be great for the schools if the union or somebody can afford them. And I know there's many teachers with their own little monitors in there. It's just a matter of recording it, and then we can help you with the analyzing of it. But yes, it would work in any workplace, indoors or outdoors.
The other question is about continued advocacy, which I think fits into the last part of our discussion very well. So I think we'll hold that one for after we hear our next two speakers.
Okay, I would like John to explain what did you do with the data you collected last summer, and how do you imagine using it?
Well, for the migrant farm workers, we met with the federal agency that's responsible for setting the standards for living conditions in bunkhouses. And we suggested that they add a section. They had a section for how low the temperature could go, 18 degrees. And then we suggested just adding how high the temperature, a ceiling of 26 degrees. And they were very appreciative of our information and thought it was a good idea. However, there's a lot of bureaucracy because it has to go from the federal government to the provincial government to the public health agencies. But if we can get the checklist changed so that a maximum temperature is in the checklist, we're hoping that will make a big change. And I want to recognize Sela's work also in helping us get that change in the checklist.
Great. Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions that people wanted to put their hands up?
I think, oh,
I'm sorry? No? Okay.
no, we're good for now.
Okay, good. So thanks very much, John. I really appreciate it. And Laura, I do hope there's some people in the meeting today who are willing to take you up on your offer to organize a set of monitors to go into a workplace or a community, a tenant's building that seems to be particularly hot for tenants, or a school, and measure what happens over the summer and use that data to agitate. Our next speaker is Flora Aldridge. Ken, could you please put up Flora's slides? Flora is the project coordinator of Healthy Environments for Learning Day, also known as HELD, which is a project of the Canadian Partnership for Children's Health and Environment, sometimes called KIPCHE. Flora has a Bachelor of Arts in Science from McGill University and has been working with a number of interdisciplinary organizations and diverse community-led projects related to environment and climate justice, education and outdoor learning, children's health, and the arts, as well as sustainable food systems. Go ahead, Flora.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you, Ken. Hello, everyone. My name is Flora Aldridge, and my pronouns are she and her. You can go to the next slide, please. So first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Canadian Partnership for Children's Health and Environment, or KIPCHI. So KIPCHI is a national collaboration of organizations with overlapping missions that have been working together since 2001 to improve children's environmental health in Canada. We have a number of partner and affiliate organizations who have expertise in clinical and public health, environmental protection, law and policy, childcare, education, disability advocacy, and health equity. And they're all pictured there below. Next slide, please. So today I will be discussing one of KIPCHI's main projects, the Healthy Environments for Learning Day campaign. And this is the campaign that I coordinate. So KIPCHI took on leadership of HELD in 2017. And with this leadership, we expanded the scope of what was formerly known as Healthy Schools Day to include childcare and early learning settings. And additionally, KIPCHI brought in a specific campaign focus for each year. Our HELD campaigns prioritize and foster collaboration across multiple sectors. So a key part of our approach is the Multi-Sectoral Advisory Committee, which we convene to bring together diverse expertise in order to develop a unified vision and direction on crucial aspects of healthy learning environments. So we engage professionals and experts from public health, education, early learning and childcare, environmental justice, sustainability, child health advocacy, environmental law, academia and health research, labor unions, technical experts, as well as parent and community advocates. So we believe that it's crucial to have a multitude of backgrounds and expertise represented in our advisory committee, from professional and in the field expertise to grounded and lived expertise as well. And some of the main objectives of HELD are to raise awareness and encourage action to prevent environmental health risks and to promote policy action. So on the left of the screen here, these are our campaigns to date. And so today we'll be focusing on this year's campaign, which is on extreme heat. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, back. There we go, perfect. So this year's campaign focuses on extreme heat, which is a growing concern, as many speakers have already touched on, as well as Jennifer spoke about in her introduction. But extreme heat is, of course, a growing concern in educational settings, as heat waves are getting hotter, longer, and more common as a result of climate change. So extreme heat has many impacts to health and well-being, but is particularly dangerous for children, as Jennifer outlined, being one of the most vulnerable populations. So firstly, extreme heat has physiological effects on children, including heat illnesses, as well as effects on the brain. So extreme heat kind of impacts children and develops slowed cognition, emotional functioning, and memory, as well as impacts to the immune system. And second, sustained and excessive heat negatively impacts children's behavior and mental health. Learning in a hot classroom can lead to students and teachers feeling unmotivated and distracted and irritable. Third, academic performance declines as temperatures increase. So one study that we've referenced throughout our work pointed in New York City found that students taking exam on a 90-degree day were nearly 11% less likely to pass that same exam than students taking the exam on the 72-degree day. Additionally, there are cumulative impacts on students who are living in under-resourced communities. So children are typically spending 6 to 8 or more hours per day in school or childcare. So providing all children with health-promoting environments in those hours of the day is really crucial for health equity. And lastly, extreme heat affects children both indoors and outdoors. And outdoors, children are also faced with impacts from wildfire smoke and air pollution. So optimizing outdoor learning spaces to protect against extreme heat is really important. Next slide, please. So based on the vast health evidence present on extreme heat impacts to children's health, well-being, and learning, we decided to focus this year's health campaign on extreme heat. And so many educational settings in Canada are ill-equipped to protect children and staff from extreme heat. Through this campaign, we, alongside many collaborators and partners, are advocating for the optimization of educational spaces to be climate resilient and health promoting spaces. So at the heart of this work is health equity and climate advocacy. We recognize that communities are disproportionately affected by climate change, and thus addressing environmental injustice is a crucial part of our advocacy. We believe that strong policies are essential for protecting both human and environmental health, which is why we are actively promoting and advocating for policies that address both climate adaptation as well as mitigation. Next slide, please. So through this year's health campaign, Kipchi is mobilizing partners and collaborators to call upon decision makers to take urgent action on extreme heat in schools and childcare settings across Canada. So we are calling that educational settings be optimized to protect against extreme heat. This includes, for example, mechanical cooling and ventilation upgrades and installation, building retrofits, which also help to improve energy efficiency, increase natural and constructed shade like tree canopy, and much more. Through our work on this campaign, we have also identified, like some other speakers have spoke to today, that there are significant data gaps regarding heat levels in educational settings and relevant data on how heat impacts children's health and learning in Canada. So we hope that more data and more research can be collected to help further mobilize this work in order to protect against extreme heat. And we hope that this collective call for action can help to catalyze the work needed in extreme heat protection and recognize all children's right to learn in environments that promote their health and well-being. So our collective call for action will be released on which is on April 24th. The call for action will be released on our website at 5 a.m. and will additionally be featured in hopefully some news and media sources. And then at which time it will also be sent to all relevant ministers and decision makers, as well as being locally mobilized through our partner networks. So if you're interested in signing on for the call or mobilizing this collective call through your networks, please feel free to reach out to me. And thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Flora. That was great, and it's really good to hear about it in another context, the schools and childcare centers and so on. I think that's a really important point. One of the important issues too is that children might be exposed to heat at school and then go home to hot apartments as well. So we may find it's not just workers who are exposed to heat at work and at home, but we get these double whammy situations where people are exposed in all aspects of their life. So last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Jacqueline Wilson. Jacqueline is a staff lawyer at Canadian Environmental Law Association. She represents individuals, public interest community groups, and First Nations before tribunals and in trial and appellate course. Appellate, how do you pronounce appellate? Yes, that's it. Her Her casework focuses on environmental justice related to air, land, and water pollution and climate adaptation. Jacqueline's law reform work focuses on climate adaptation, energy justice, lead in drinking water, and land use planning. She's published several book chapters, including Chapter 4 on energy justice and poverty, a case study for Ontario, in the book Sustainable Energy Transitions in Canada by Mark Winfield, Stephen Hill, and James Gade, published in 2023. I should say that Jacqueline's published many more things as well, but I've only cited one of them. In her spare time, and I'm amazed that she has any, Jacqueline loves to frolic in local parks with her partner and her young children. Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask someone to put up the slides. Great, thank you. And you can go ahead to slide number 4. As we've heard this evening, the issue of climate change and extreme heat impacts isn't treated in a particularly comprehensive manner by any of our laws. Although I would say that climate change is slowly gaining recognition in law and policy in particular. Next slide, please. I'm going to highlight 2 of the more recent and important cases on climate change in Canada. The first is the reference that was heard on the federal government's Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. And I was highlighting this case because there were evidentiary findings about climate change and heat in particular. In paragraph 9, they mention the negative effects on human health and climate change, including heat-related morbidity and mortality. Next slide, please. And at paragraph 10, the Supreme Court of Canada recognized in that case that there's going to be an increase in frequency and severity of heat waves. Next slide, please. The other case I was going to briefly mention is the Ontario Court of Appeals decision in the Mather case. The legal significance of that case is about the court finding that the case could go ahead and that the matter could be adjudicated in the courts. But the court also recognized expert evidence that heat waves are increasing in frequency, which will increase, again, heat-related morbidity and mortality. Next slide, please. But also that children and Indigenous youth are particularly vulnerable to climate change. Next slide, please. There's also a growing recognition of the unfairness of the impacts of climate change, mostly in government policy, and heat is a primary example. There's often been a dichotomy between climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation work and policy, which is problematic with respect to heat, because many programs, for instance, won't include things like mechanical cooling, trying to address indoor heat, because it doesn't directly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I wanted to suggest as an approach for all of us going forward that a climate resiliency approach in all of our work centered both on climate mitigation and health and safety and centered on people will ensure that the framework for progress on climate resiliency doesn't burden low income or disproportionately impacted people with the need to prove that indoor cooling or climate measures and safety measures are also about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. The legislative frameworks, as I mentioned, are different for different exposures to heat, which makes advocacy on this topic somewhat disparate and difficult. I've listed some of the legislative powers and provisions here relating to health units and their powers to address health hazards, but also some of the legislative power relating to tenants and schools and childcare facilities and migrant agricultural workers. Next slide, please. There was an important breakthrough in cooling in long-term care homes in Ontario with the introduction of Ontario Regulation 246, which led to mechanical cooling requirements in residence rooms. Section 23 of that regulation requires a heat-related illness and prevention plan between May 15th and September 15th, and on all days where the outdoor or indoor temperature is above 26 degrees Celsius. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, we're one ahead, but that's okay. You can leave it up. That's okay. There's also been some narrow recognition that we've heard about indoor temperature standards of 26 degrees in Mississauga and Ajax. But as mentioned by Eddie, it only applies so far to tenants that already have cooling in their units. And the City of Toronto did endorse a maximum temperature standard of 26 degrees in late 2024 with implementation plans to follow this year. So it's important to keep the momentum going, and there has been a bit of a breakthrough to share successes and build on the successes in all of the areas that we've heard about tonight. So how can CELA help? We're available to help with local efforts to push first for maximum temperature bylaws in municipalities across Ontario with reports, research, deputations, strategy. And I've included some links on this slide to some of those resources. Next slide, please. I did also want to mention that the Clean Air Partnership is hosting a webinar series starting on May 7th on maximum temperature bylaws for municipal staff across the province. They've created some useful background materials and a model bylaw and model staff report that I wanted to bring to your attention, and it's open for registration. Next slide, please. We've also been helping with emergency efforts at the local level, the municipal level, to secure new and expanded access to programs offering free mechanical cooling for tenants, including better access to available discretionary benefits under Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Program, and other programs like the EAP program, which is the program under the provincial government for low-income tenants. Next slide, please. We've also been collaborating with OCAL on efforts to address indoor temperatures in migrant agricultural worker bunkhouses, and writing submissions to government on conditions in bunkhouses. Next slide, please. And finally, CELA is publishing 2 reports on April 24th on heat in schools and heat in childcare facilities in conjunction with Kipchi's Healthy Environments for Learning Day campaign that you just heard about on April 24th. So we're looking forward to advocacy efforts focused on heat in schools and heat in childcare facilities. So with that whirlwind, I'm going to leave it there, but thank you very much. And please feel free to get in touch with me to learn more about CELA's law reform campaign on inequitable impacts of climate change and how we can help.
Thanks very much, Jacqueline. I think when you see that Jackie is involved not only in the maximum heat bylaw campaigns, but also Kipchi with the Children's Health Network, with OCAL and farm workers and so on. It is amazing that she has time to frolic in the local parks with her children and her partner. I should say too that CELA has really excellent resources on their website that people can use to argue with their local city councils and so on about the legality of requiring landlords to provide cooling and other kinds of resources. So before we move, well, sorry, are there questions for Flora or Jacqueline? And if you haven't had an opportunity to put questions into the Q&A, feel free to raise your hand. Nick.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. I had a comment in response to all the presentations. Is this the time to make that, or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for organizing this webinar, to Jennifer and all those people who are involved. In this presentations, we have the makings, I think, of a very powerful coalition that can indeed change things. So the experience has been, and I'm talking about workplace experience now, and John is familiar with this. OCAL was set up in the late 1980s as a result of a series of mass refusals in workplaces around safety issues. And in the end, what's going to take to really make the changes, particularly because these are going to be very costly changes that have to happen in the workplace, that have to happen in communities, have to happen in places where people live. It's going to take the kind of decisive action that people will be organized and build a very strong, powerful movement around it. And I want to put a pitch to the idea of using the thermometers or the I forget what the term is, whatever it is. The experience in organizing in the workplace was, once people had the information and knew what was happening, and they knew what was happening, and they could share the experience, they could then get organized. It was very critical. So having that kind of information, workplace by workplace, community by community, living, residence by residence, about what's happening in terms of heat can be a very powerful motivator. And so I'd suggest that. And also, it seems that this coalition that you have here in this meeting, if we work together, which clearly is what's happening, we can build a very strong, movement around these issues. It's going to get worse, we know, so we're going to have to step up the effort. And I really want to congratulate you on this organizing what's happening.
Thanks, Nick. Actually, you're previewing what I was going to say next. I was going to invite our speakers to say how they think we can support one another in our efforts to protect our members and constituencies from heat. And I would also be interested in certainly what other members of the audience think we should be doing on that front. But could I ask?
There were a couple of questions
Oh.
that I held off people
Oh, okay.
to the end that were specific, and then there
Sure.
were those ones.
Okay.
So one is for Eddie. Could you explain how the Mississauga maximum heat bylaw should be improved? If you are at your
Eddie is here, yeah.
computer at the moment. And someone asked what would be an upper limit temperature recommendation for outdoor workers, if John had one. Eddie, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, again, with the maximum heat bylaw in Mississauga, the main issue is really that as of right now, it only covers people who already have like air conditioning. Whereas in a lot of cases, really those who most need the benefits of a max heat bylaw are those who do not have air conditioning or other forms of cooling. So yeah, it is a pretty significant gap that we feel should be improved.
Great, thank you. Recommendation for maximum heat for outdoor workers. John.
Yes, there isn't a single number. It depends on how much energy you're expending to do your work, whether there's sun and things like that. We've put together a simplified version that helps workplaces determine how many breaks, how much work you can do per hour and things like that. I'll just put that in the chat right now.
Thank you.
If you're interested. This plan has been written into guidelines in many provinces, in BC, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia. For some reason, Ontario doesn't want to write it into their guidelines, but and it's worked in many workplaces, and I really want to recognize the CAW and George Boddock, especially, who really brought this out to many workplaces, and it has worked for at least 25 years.
Great. And one other specific question before we go to the bigger discussion, which is there any recommendation of a best changeover date in multi-unit residential buildings between the heating and the air conditioning? Does anyone have an opinion or an evidence-based response on that?
Jackie, do you know?
No, I don't have a good evidence-based response. I know that Toronto recently changed the dates that they were going to recommend it be switched over. So I'll just check what that was exactly. But there's always a bit of a flaw with that approach because the season is a little unpredictable and changing so quickly in terms of when the heating system is.
And the changes they recommend recognize the additional heat, like the increased temperature, ambient temperature, and climate change. Oh, let's adapt to climate change.
Yes, I have some firsthand experience in evaluating buildings during that period, and I can tell you that some buildings can only provide either air conditioning or heating. And there's a 1 week changeover period where they have to mechanically change things over. And yeah, if you get a cold spell like snow that we had today, after they've changed over, then things are going to be cold. And the reverse is true in the fall. If you change over too quickly. So to have resilient ventilation systems that don't have this problem is the solution to it. I know in our house we can put both air conditioning and cooling, so at night we can have some heating if we need it, and during the day we can have air conditioning and we don't have to switch anything. However, that's a technical fix to address that problem, but finding a date is always going to be a problem.
So Jennifer, I'll just report that some of the other questions I think fit into the larger discussion, the question you were going to ask the speakers, but they are things like what can we do to keep pushing for the bylaw in Ontario, or the law in Ontario? Is all of this just in Ontario? How can we push this outside of Ontario? And the intractable problem of school board budgets. And how do we fix all the old schools in Ontario as they have been starved by by sequential conservative governments?
A big question.
Yes.
Well, can I turn first to some of the panelists to say, are there ways in which we can work together more to advance this issue among multiple populations? Laura, you're nodding there. Can I put you on the spot and ask?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, that's one of the reasons why we took it from the working conditions or other people's experiences as well, right? And when you improve a working condition, you improve the outcome for all. I think, there's a really good point made by Nick about work refusals. Well, unions can't direct a work refusal. So it requires empowering and encouraging workers to be able to do that. And so as a group, making sure that we are encouraging workers, not through the union spaces, but through community spaces, to take that stand, and ensuring that we're providing opportunities like this where people can learn about how you can take that stand. And I think it's also about making demands. I mean, part of the problem is we have billions of dollars in school board disrepair. And so to even tackle that, then add into the heat issue. But, I think that's where we're going to have to start using the tools that we have available to us, and encouraging each other to understand and what needs to be happening. I mean, I would love for every single, there be representatives from every single school board. It'd be great if it was the employer, I'm going to be honest, but I'm not going to hold my breath today on that one. But it would be great if, workers in every single school board were coming together and getting this data available for John, because how powerful would that data be for all of us to be able to say, this is the actual situation in schools, not what people want you to hear, but this is what is heard. And I think that can be replicated for long-term care homes. I think that can be replicated for apartment buildings. I think that can be replicated. So how do we do these, organizing conversations around why it's important to learn about this and take action, and people knowing that there's people in the community that are going to support them. As an education worker, that's the biggest fear. If I say that I'm going to refuse unsafe work, is the community going to support me, or are we going to be treated like pariahs for standing up because we get the summers off, or whatever the story is? And so I think as a community coming together behind tenants, coming behind workers, coming behind people, and saying, no, this is an issue that has to be dealt with, and then using the tools that we've heard about today from CLF, from OCAL, to give some validity to the work we're doing, and that we're not just paying it lip service.
Right. Eddie, Lydia, could you put your visuals on, your video on, so we can, Lydia, I was thinking that your initiatives around your heat advice and having people who will go, for example, check on vulnerable people in hot tenant buildings and stuff like that, might in fact be something that could happen in other settings as well. And I'm wondering what you think of that. Your heat protocol, I guess, is the term. Could we develop heat protocols for other environments, whether they're for schools or for workplaces, while this, knowing that retrofits can be very slow to come and budgetary issues are really real. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. Because the protocol that we created is like evolving document. We call draft because the idea is we can play with that in different settings. Why we create in St. Town? Because it's like that was a very interesting, let's say, like incubator for this idea. Because all these buildings, they are very old. They are from the 60s. So basically, is people they don't have a proper like ventilation. So can you imagine in the 60s, all the buildings were prepared for winter, so they can open the windows, and it's a very huge issue there that they cannot have a, especially through the housing buildings, so they cannot have a ACs in the window because the window they are totally old. They don't have that capacity to hold an AC. It's very expensive for them to put a new AC. So basically, East Toronto Housing is providing them portable AC that is not working properly. It's very noisy, and too many different issues. So what we decide is to prepare this protocol in order for all these people living in this kind of very hot environment. To have this kind of tool to basically is to prepare themselves for what is coming. But of course, this protocol we can redesign in many different settings.
I was thinking that your protocol, though, includes things like advice to people to even do things like, to have cool rooms in the buildings.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
work for that. And that could also work in other settings. But John's advice for people who work in hot workplaces is breaks and water to prevent dehydration, which can be a major problem, and so on. And I would imagine that for tenants, there are sort of intermediate stages while what you really want is a retrofit of buildings so that they.
Yeah, but in this case, it's like kind of impossible to do that. It's very expensive, and so no one is talking about like doing a very proper retrofit in all these buildings. So people living there, they need to adapt, they need to prepare, and so that's exactly what we are working right now. Is like requesting every single building they have this kind of a tiny recreation room. So how about having that as a cooling place with resources, with you say water, emergency kit for like heat waves. Like what happened also there is like it's not only heat waves, it's also blackout. Um, when it's very hot, they don't have electricity, and sometimes they don't have elevators. So you have people who's totally trapped in the 23, 24th floor. And that is why volunteers, they need to start like helping all these people.
Right.
Yeah.
Eddie, when you're working on maximum heat bylaw, do you look at other kinds of demands for buildings while you're trying to get to the stage where air conditioning and cooling is available to everybody in those buildings and so on? Is that part of what you campaign on too?
I mean, for us, like again, we are really operating mainly in terms of pushing for those uh the max heat bylaws. Um, Part of what we are trying to get off the sort of off the ground are what we call eco tenant unions. So I mean it's very very similar to a traditional tenant union, but it, would also be addressing issues like, cooling and heating systems, for, the buildings that people live in. Um, that is something that's still very much in its early stages. But yeah, we are really looking to bring the, sort of the tenant organizing model, to address, issues outside the sort of, more traditional like rent and repair issues.
Jackie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, from Sela's perspective, um, we were quite influenced by, the public health research, but also, I would say in particular, the report that came out of the BC extreme heat event in 2021 that you mentioned in your opening, when 619 people died. And one of the main findings in that report was that it was indoor heat, and indoor temperatures above 26 degrees that was the main cause of death then. And so we took that finding and we said, well, then we need to address the problem and we need to tackle it head on. So that certainly, like tree cover and, shade and retrofits and all that is very important. And we support all of that, of course. But we can't shy away from what the real answer is, which is regulating indoor temperatures. And so that is sort of where we've landed in terms of a real focus on pushing for cooling.
Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to emphasize that the two go together. The adaptation, organizing ourselves to protect ourselves in any way we can in the circumstances we're in, is part of organizing to have the changes that have to happen. It's part of the way we build the base of people who will be active in the movement, have that sense that they have power, they have community, they have solidarity. And I think it's really interesting concept, the eco tenants union, because what workplaces have is unions, which is the natural way in which they can self-organize. What communities are lacking is ways in which to self-organize. And then, this has the potential of bringing various forms of self-organization together to both protect ourselves, because nobody else is doing it for us, and also to fight for the kind of changes that will be needed and that, must take place.
Thanks, Nick. John?
Yeah, there are a number of simple things that can be done in emergency situations to cool things off. And some of it is just simple engineering principles that need to be better communicated. One of them is, for instance, the box fans. If you stick a box fan in a window, it's wise to point it outwards and close the windows so that you direct the air from the coolest side of the building through your living space and then out. If you turn it around, it's not as effective. That's a simple thing. There's blinds, there's evaporative cooling, hanging wet material over the window when the wind's coming in. As it evaporates, it takes out some of the heat. Shade over the windows and things like that. Many simple ideas. I think, Jacqueline, you had one of your people look for some information sheets about simple things people could do.
Yeah, one resource I would maybe draw to everyone's attention is there was a coalition of groups working in Toronto that we kind of named ourselves the Toronto Heat Safety Coalition. And in that, we tried to break down demands in terms of kind of overall demands and then emergency type demands. And so that gets into things like free bus tickets on extreme heat days to make sure that people can get, like transit is often cooled. And so it's a way of sort of mobile cooling, but also to be able to get to, cooling centers more easily. That also includes like free air conditioning programs and just kind of like getting more cooling out into homes.
Would it be useful I'm just trying to think of ways that we can combine our efforts and to just make this a bigger issue that has to be addressed by governments and other authorities. And I'm just wondering, and I address this to everybody in the room, what you think we could do more to kind of collaborate and make this a bigger issue in the coming heat season. John and then Flora.
Yeah, the one thing is to be opportunistic. Last year, near the end of June, we had 3 days of extreme heat. They were the hottest days of the whole summer. And we were caught off guard, so if you're ready and get your messages out when it's really hot, that's when people are ready to listen. So being opportunistic about, when the heat wave hits, you're ready.
Right. That's partly why we're having this meeting in April. Flora?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think just from hearing all the presentations tonight, it's clear that a lot of us are working towards very similar goals. And, this is one of the reasons why Kipchi and Sila decided to sort of co-launch our call for action plus these reports on extreme heat at the same time, because they obviously work together and cover a lot of like similar ground. So, for instance, something that we talk a lot about at Kipchi and through these campaigns is how can we, get a little bit creative and like think outside of the box in terms of how these calls and how these actions are actually being realized. So, for instance, if there's an opportunity to leverage existing policies, like Laura was speaking about health and safety policies, so using those, where there might not be a policy on extreme heat in schools, but how can we work through health and safety policies to, you know, allow for workers to have these like refusals of work based on extreme heat that will in turn positively impact and positively drive for like change on extreme heat, which will affect children as well. Yeah, and then just similarly, it sounds like a lot of us are also pushing for, that's one thing is included in our call for action too, is pushing for this like standard for a 26 max temperature of 26-degree threshold. So I feel like there's ways that maybe we can collaborate on that as well.
Good, very good. We're coming to the end of our time. Are there other comments or suggestions? Jackie, go ahead.
The other thing I was just going to say, and it's, this is not a group that's inexperienced in sort of campaigning and organizing and building, pressure for change. But I've been working on heat for a few years now in all these sort of different areas. And I must say that, always, and it's maybe obvious, but the most memorable presentations or deputations or things that I've heard come from people with lived experience about exposures to heat. So I have this, still very vivid memory, for instance, of an Acorn member in Toronto talking about what it was like to walk into her apartment. And the way that she described it was that it was like opening an oven and the heat would just sort of hit her whenever she walked into the apartment. And I have never been able to get that out of, my mind. So, there's always so much benefit in really hearing about what it's, actually like dealing with this extreme heat in all these different circumstances and how dangerous it is.
Good, thank you. Lydia.
Yeah, I just want to mention that also like another big issue right now that we want to work is mental issues. Like for example, in our work in San Francisco, we can see many people with schizophrenia. And we decide now to work with two doctors. One of them is like a psychiatric and another one is like ER doctor. So we want to dig more about how we can help people with mental issues to be ready for emergency, like for heat waves. And I just going to put in the chat about like how many people die from schizophrenia during the 2021 in British Columbia. That was 8.3% people were with schizophrenia. And we, after our first meeting, one of the doctors was mentioning that the pill that they are taking also made the body more heat. So basically, is when it's very hot weather. So they are basically is boiling. So it's something that we need to have in mind too. So they are like a very, very vulnerable for this. And
Yes.
we
Thank
are
you.
going to start like doing this work.
Thanks very much, Lydia. Shelley?
Thanks. It just took, you know, in the simplest of actions, as you said, if we're all ready, then we can do something more than if we aren't ready. And so I think if everyone has their hygrometer kind of ready to go, in whatever circumstance they find themselves or whoever they end up talking to, I think that would be great. And I think, you know, in terms of the work that Flora is doing, like I have lots of questions about who all are you working with and do they know this report is coming, but I don't have to be answered specifically here. I think Flora's got a good handle on all that, but for sure there's you know, we at SCAN, we haven't had all of these campaigns on our radar, and now we will. So there's one new way that this is going to go around. So thanks to everyone for organizing this and for participating. That I think is very helpful.
Thanks, Shelley. Sophia, you have the last word.
Thank you so much for giving me time. So I am not expert, just like all of you are, but I have one suggestions. Just like I am doing the climate change, and this will be the fourth year. What about the G GHG, greenhouse gases? So if you want to make a change, just like the ordinary residents of the community, they can participate and they should be given the knowledge where what goes where. The compost is the main thing that it should go to the green bin, but it is not going, and it is also the one of the reason of the climate change and the heat and the floods throughout the world, and the rich countries just like Canada. We are not contributing these things. Even our residents don't have any idea that which thing goes in which bin. And even it is very sad news that we don't have any, in most of the buildings, we don't have any green bins to put the compost in it. And in the schools, I worked in TDSB, but I never saw any green bin. I worked as a lunchroom supervisor. And the children have to throw their leftover food in the garbage. Everybody has the knowledge of recycling. Garbage everyone knows, but nobody knows just like about the green bin. That this is the main cause. If the city or the federal government or the provincial government should contribute and give some incentives to the residents, and each and every building we did a lot in Thorncliffe area, but we need more.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I think we would all agree with that. Well, it's time to wrap up. I'd really like to thank all of our speakers for coming tonight and to filling us in on your work, and also to the audience for your thoughtful comments and questions. I will say the Heat Collaborative, I hope, will continue to meet over this heat season, and perhaps we can begin to get ourselves ready, as people have suggested, for when it hits us. Some more coordinated actions and so on. I think we see through the Heat Collaborative, there certainly is a gradual increase in coordination. We ask one another to support one another during submissions to councils around the bylaws, for example. You know, SCAN developed, started to collect signatures for the OFL's heat stress petition to the government and so on. And I think we can do more of that. And I look forward to working with you, other people in the room, and the other organizations that are working on this important issue. So thanks very much, everybody, and good night.